welcome to the Middle Grades Conversations, episode 7 of the 2022-2023 school year. This work is supported by the Middle Grades Collaborative, and my name is Don Taylor, and I teach sustainability at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about project-based learning and community-based learning and how folks are using that to perhaps re-engage students in the ongoing aftermath of the pandemic. I'd like to introduce or have our contributors introduce themselves. And while we do that, just give us a brief check-in of how things are going with your organization or with your learning community. And I'll hand it off to Christy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Howell. I'm a program director at Up for Learning. And I would say we're very busy. We're getting a lot of outreach from schools. Schools are really looking for support in lots of different areas, particularly around wellness and equity. I'd say those are like our two biggest needs right now that we're getting from schools. So yeah, excited to be here and excited for the conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Pioli-Hunt. I'm a 5'8" teacher at Williston Central School. Things are going pretty well. We're kind of in that coming down from reports. Last week, we had to do our grading report, so it was definitely busy, a little hectic. And our trimester just ended, so we're kind of starting the new trimester and have our sights on this spring and summer coming up, which we all know is an absolute sprint at the end of the school year. So we're hunkering down, getting ready for that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Devin Schrock. Currently, I'm a literacy coach at Heinsberg Community School. And I wanted to come in and join this conversation because project-based and service-based learning are something that's super near and dear to my heart. I have taught middle school in various grades 5 through 8 for maybe 17 years in public ed and also outdoor education. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, again, my name is Don Taylor and I teach sustainability here. And I think it is really busy, just to echo what Christy mentioned, and pretty much everybody, I think, after the winter break, it seems to really pick up speed. And it's also sugaring season. And we are in the midst of sugaring with our school, with our kids. And so I can definitely talk about that in terms of project-based learning and also maybe a little bit of outdoor education. And I think one of the through lines that Christy mentioned too is this idea of wellness and equity, and maybe how we can use project-based learning to connect with wellness and to provide equitable opportunities for all of our students. So looking forward to this conversation. And we are joined by another one of our contributors, Meg O'Donnell. Meg, do you want to introduce yourself and just give us a brief check-in?
Sure. Hi there. I apologize for being late. My name is Meg O'Donnell. I teach humanities on the red team at Shelburne Community School to 7th and 8th graders. And it's been a long day, so I apologize. We have tomorrow set aside as a trade day for parent conferences. And I am really looking forward to taking that as a day. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
All right. So I just kind of want to go over some of the questions I often look at the Jeannie Phillips created an equity, literacy, and middle grades competencies tool that we often look at to kind of figure out what questions we should be asking of our own practice. And some of the questions that I pulled from that tool for today are what inequities do my students face in their lives, and how could we possibly address those inequities in our classes? How can we use project-based learning and service learning to address inequity and bias in meaningful ways? And the other piece of this is how can we maybe connect with community partners or outside organizations to really amplify and excite and sort of energize our curriculums. So those are pulled from the middle grades curriculum instruction and assessment section of that tool. I could certainly post that tool online. And speaking of project-based and community-based learning, the first question we have, and I put the new chat order in the new speaking order in the chat, but the first question I have is, how is project-based learning or community-based learning being implemented in your learning community, or are you seeing? And what are the potential benefits of that as an educator that you see? So again, where are you seeing these things happening, and what do you think are the potential benefits? Christy.
Yeah, I can say so much of what we do at UP is very project-based, community-based. So thinking about like the CPS, Cultivating Pathways to Sustainability program that we have, and how integrated that is with project-based, community-based learning. Like just thinking about last year work with Cross at Brook in Waterbury, and we had the students kind of, there was about 4 or 5 teams, and they all chose something to work on sustainability related. And that was like everything from like reducing plastic utensil use in their cafeteria to doing like a cleanup or helping to organize Green Up Day for their community. So yeah, just saw so much joy and real engagement from those teams that we were working with at Cross at Brook. And then I'm thinking about this year, a lot of the work we're doing, or at least I've been focused on this year, is a lot of Burlington area work, and we're really looking at the discipline data, which is it's a very heavy topic, and inequities in the discipline data, but really helping teams of youth and adults, build community first before they start looking at this data, and then finding ways to engage the community around the data, whether that's like an event where they're sharing their findings or making recommendations to the leadership around how to change this. So really involved, all of our projects are very community involved, I would say. They just sort of differ in their focus, but there is often a real level of engagement in that, because it's real world stuff. It's real, things that touch their lives. So I see a lot of engagement from the youth and the adults that we have on those teams.
For us, it's been kind of a slow go back from COVID with some of our traditions that get our students out in the community and have us doing some bigger projects. Couple that really come to mind, throughout the school year. Like this year, we did our theater unit, which I know I've talked about on this before, in terms of just like students being fully immersed in that and having it be a student-led piece for a full month, putting out full production. Currently, the things that we're in, we have sustainability groups. So there's sustainability action projects. We're broken up, and we stole some ideas from Don on this years ago, and worked for a lot of people through MGI just to help us map it out. Basically, students have picked about 15 or 16 different committees that are connected to the global goals, and they're looking at the assets and needs in our community, and kind of linking up with partners and making a plan for different projects and ways that they can help and kind of grow and learn with their community partners. So it's one of those things where some groups are doing really well, and other groups are and out in the community, and other groups are still kind of spinning the wheels a little bit, and it's need a little more TLC around what they're doing. But overall, I think the thought is there, and we meet twice a week with these groups, and they're making some great progress. Other things that we are finally getting into as well that we're really excited about, at the end of our school year, we offer a trip to either New York City or Washington, D.C. for a full week, where we bring about 2/3 of our team down and about 30 to 40 parents, and we stay down there for a week, and it's a very personalized experience. The kids pick where they go, but the one thing that's the really academic part is they choose one thing they want to study and end up doing an independent project on it. So students right now that are going on that trip are really immersed in that work of kind of doing some research on the ground, doing the legwork, figuring out the places they want to go. This year's a New York City trip. So where they want to visit in the city, who they're going to interview or mentor, or find as a mentor for our 8th graders who is connected to a bigger project they have. So it's just like that excitement around those bigger pieces that are just a huge part of our team's culture are finally coming back to the forefront, which has been feeling really nice for us to kind of get back to some of those pieces that we've missed since COVID. And, this group is the first time of our 4-year team that we've kind of starting from scratch again. And it's interesting to, start it all over, other than the families and students who had older siblings that have gone through this, which is exciting, but also a little daunting on our end. So it's all going well.
All these ideas make me miss being in a middle school classroom of my own. I think there are pockets of project-based learning happening in my learning community at my school. This is a new school for me. It's a new year for me, a new role, lots of newness. But I'm actually really curious to also explore how do we reinvigorate that for educators? That idea of burnout's real. Like coming out of COVID is hard. The behaviors are escalating, and how can we leverage project-based learning, community-based learning to boost engagement and motivation, which maybe perhaps will decrease some of the behavior that we see because kids will be really excited about what's going on. So I'm curious to kind of explore that whole, like, how do we get it back, in middle level as well.
Let's see. We have something that's been sort of exciting is finally getting a chance for both our 2 7-8 teams to come together to kind of cross-pollinate ideas. We've because of COVID, we were sort of forced into these silos a little bit. And I know that the other 7-8 team, that the yellow team, we're the red team, the yellow team has been doing some projects related to the sustainability goals. And we're like about a month behind them. We're in the process of trying to coordinate with our community partners around. We've just been reading this book, The Most Costly Journey, and have done some work around food systems. And so we're specifically going to try to work with Shelburne Farms and Vermont Feeds and our own food shelf to try to get students out into the community in some way. But we're also aware that we're also trying to fold in this inquiry piece, because we want the learning to be, not everyone wants to pick up the thread related to food systems. So we're in the process of just trying to coordinate with, it takes a lot of time to coordinate with just with outside organizations. Wendy Halleck and I are partners in this. For example, there was a veteran, a World War II veteran that wants to work with our school around interviewing veterans. And so we want to pick up that thread too. And so we're just trying to like coordinate is like really the main word here. But what Sam Nelson's kid and Jeff Badillo's kids are, like a student came in the other day and one is collecting food for the food shelf, another one is collecting period products for Project Poverty, period poverty, something like that. And so the kids this is a really nice sort of advertisement for how we want our kids to be doing the same thing. We all have, well, not all of us, but some of the behavior challenges have really peaked in the last week or so, and has made for it's just made for some challenges in our community. We're really feeling these behaviors and the harm that's been done. So we're trying to not make that be the narrative, and that's requiring just a lot of navigating and negotiating. But I am confident. I do know that when we have these conversations with kids, and when we start talking about our food systems, and we start talking about things that they see in the community that they want to give back, I know that there's some energy there. We just can't let it be a single story. So that's sort of where we're at.
Thank you very much, Meg. Before I talked to this topic, I just want to let Joe Rivers introduce himself perhaps to our viewing audience.
Hi, I'm Joe Rivers. I work at Brattleboro Area Middle School.
Thank you, Joe. So one of the things that a couple people have mentioned this cultivating pathways to sustainability, and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And my next question is just going to be about frameworks or resources that you think are, are helpful, especially to teachers who are looking to get into the community-based and project-based learning. And I actually have some resources. The Vermont Agency of Education has some resources too, and I'd like to share those with people. But I had to step away for a little bit because I had to take the applesauce bread out of the oven. And one of the things Meg was talking about food systems, and one of the things that we've really started doing is working with food systems. And as part of COVID, or as an outcome of COVID, I ended up with a classroom that's attached to the FCS, what used to be the FCS room. And we didn't have an FCS teacher after COVID. And so we've really focused on sustainability, and we really focused on project-based learning related to that. And so we have, Meg also mentioned working with outside organizations, and we're working pretty closely with a group called Just Basics in Montpelier, and they run a food pantry, and they also do a lot of social justice work. And I couldn't have asked for a better mission-driven organization. And what's happening is that they are seeing a doubling of visits to the food pantry because of inflation and also the pandemic. And I kind of want to just tie into what Devin was talking about in terms of literacy. So what's happening is we're doing some reading where we read their impact statements, we read the information that's coming out of that organization, and we really dial in to this idea of food insecurity. And then through another organization called Community Harvest of Central Vermont, who specializes in gleaning, and some other local partners, we've been able to get food. Like, we gleaned almost 2,000 pounds of apples this year. We turn that into applesauce, and we package that. The kids package that, and then they deliver it to Just Basics, and it flies right off the shelf. And then the other thing that we've started doing now is we make applesauce bread, and we actually sell that to the proceeds come to our classroom. A third of it goes to the parents group to support all 8th graders, and a third of it is going to be donated back to the Just Basics organization. And the reason I bring this up is that it kind of is a combination of zeroing in on a UN SDG, which is zero hunger. It's looking at local agriculture and food systems, and then it's partnering with a local organization. And what that's doing is it's allowing kids to work in the kitchen to make something. It's allowing them to see where it goes out in the community with purpose. And then what I'm now trying to do, this is my second year doing this, is to develop literacy elements so that they can begin to use their literacy skills to communicate our work out to the public. That includes writing podcast scripts. It includes reflection. It also includes writing to inform, newsletters and things like that we can send out to parents in the community. And what I'm finding is that kids will do the hard things, the writing and the reading, if they've either done the cooking, or they know that they're going to get in the kitchen, or they know they're going to go volunteer, or they know that there's going to be some activity. And there's a lot of different aspects of this, but for me, it's been a sort of a revolution. I used to teach regular, humanities, and I love doing that. But right now, I think that kids need some of this community-based and project-based learning, and they need to be working with each other in a semi-structured social way. And I think that's been really beneficial to see them working together as teams, in the kitchen, or packaging, or labeling, or studying. And then what's really important, I think, is also reflecting on that and asking kids to pull out what's making it work, what's making it not work, and then having them start to set goals around those. We haven't completely got there yet, but that's one element of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, or I'll ask Christy to do it, is to talk also about how leadership skills can be woven into these activities so that you can start developing the kind of skills that will help to build that community. I also want to make sure that Joe gets a chance. And Joe, the question was, how are you seeing, or how are you implementing project-based and community-based learning in your community, in your learning community currently?
How long do we have, Don? It's a great topic, and this is really fun to hang out with you folks, because I know you're all passionate about this same thing. So I do look forward to these meetings. Flexible Pathways was what, 10 years ago or so it came out, and the push then was the state made a push to say, go out and start partnering with community organizations. And so we did, and many others did too. The one that we've latched onto is the Historical Society in town. And we do many collaborations as a result of that. And we have been for, well, 10 years anyway. And so that's the community-based part. And that then connects us to the local government. And we've done some projects with the local government also, working with the town manager and the town offices in different ways. And the project-based part, I don't know, there's not a better way to work with young people, I don't think, than through that lens. You have to mix it up. You can't do it all the time. It can't be really long projects. I found that since COVID, I need to really shorten the projects up and start to build back the resilience that students need to be able to hang in there for long periods of time and to try to get things done. So I'm not sure what else to say, except that those are the things that are the main parts of our curriculum, both community-based and project-based. And I think they're fundamental to having good relationships with young people as you're trying to have them learn the skills and be introduced to the wider world that is what is going on in middle grades.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, you can just hear there's a ton of different experiences here and a ton of different perspectives, which is excellent. And it's always good to hear. And I guess for teachers who were maybe even a new teacher or a teacher who's thinking about getting into the project-based learning or getting into working with the community, are there any resources? It might actually even be your own organization. Are there any resources or frameworks that might help teachers continue integrating or to start integrating these practices into their classroom and their curriculum work? Christy?
Yeah, just echo again the CPS program and using the Sustainable Development Goals as a really great framework to begin doing sustainability work on either a small level or a larger level. Yeah, can't say enough how helpful that is to have those goals to present to students and have them like choose which one they want to focus on, and it just brings up so much great discussion, and that website is just so chock full of ideas. So yeah.
I guess not redundant, but yeah, we were really loving our connection with Up for Learning and yeah, the CPS program. We got a lot of support from Katie Farber, who has a ton of research on service-based learning. I know she's over at St. Mike's now, but Tarrant Institute for Education has quite a few articles just about project-based learning and service-based learning that I found very helpful. And actually, the course that my colleague and I are doing at St. Mike's, we were just talking about this topic, and brought up some of those articles, and they found them very useful just in terms of just the overview of what project-based learning or service-based learning is, and then a lot of helpful links and just showing like where it's working around the state and getting examples. I think one of the best things to do are things like this, where you're just kind of talking, with some other people who are in, in the trenches a little bit, and just seeing like, hey, what are you doing that's working? And if you could do it again, how would you change it? And I think there's no better feedback than that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as people were talking and sharing. One book that I read last year through a course I took at Antioch University on place-based education was called Bringing School to Life, Place-Based Education Across the Curriculum. And it's by Sarah Anderson. She's a part-time place-based coordinator and educator at an independent charter school, I believe, in Oregon. She's from Vermont, actually. And I got to talk to her on the phone for an hour last year, and it was amazing and very inspirational. But that book has actual examples of how to do projects and how to do service-based learning. And I feel like sometimes we talk around a thing in education and we don't get to the actual practice of like, how do you implement and how you do it? And so I appreciated all of the really concrete examples that were, they ranged from going to graveyards and looking for history of wars and soldiers, and then backing out from that to tell the story of the person, who fought for the country, and just really cool examples and ideas that she had in that book. I also took a course this fall, just kind of stumbled upon it, but National Geographic has professional development on their site, and they're self-paced modules for educators, and it's free. And they had a course, I did the intro to storytelling, and it was amazing. And it was all about journalism and how do you do journalism with students. Specifically, they were really focusing on middle school, high school age. And they were talking about podcasts, video journalism, photo essays, and infographics. So all these different pathways that kids could explore to report out on a topic. And so, Dawn, when you were sharing, I was just like, oh my gosh, how cool would it be to connect all of that amazing work that students were doing with the applesauce and the food pantry collaboration, and then create some sort of project that's shareable with a wider audience, with the world really, in one of those vehicles. That was a really cool PD to do. There's some really good books on journaling and how to do journaling with students. And I think project-based learning really lends itself well to just having students reflect in journals and not be assessed on their writing, but just get their thoughts out, whether it's through sketches and drawings or writing. And then also Shelburne Farms. We're lucky to have Shelburne Farms as an amazing resource around here. I've been to a lot of their professional developments, and I know that I was really inspired working with so many educators across the state and even internationally around the Sustainable Development Goals. And they also do that for us for every classroom, or at least they did. And that's a great cohort that really focuses on connecting and creating those partnerships. And how do you create those partnerships? That was part of that course. And I appreciated that years ago as an educator who liked that idea, but didn't actually know how do you start approaching people. So I think those are all pretty interesting resources that would be helpful for educators.
Devin, will you share those? Will you share that book title again, or maybe put it in the chat or something? That'd be great. I think some of the things that have helped Wendy and I sort of stay on track a little bit is we have kind of an overarching guiding question for the year, and that helps us, that whatever comes. So our question this year is, how do we impact the world, and how does the world impact us? And just how it's a big, sweeping, broad question. Any curriculum will fit in there, but it does help us to remind students that we're talking about impact, and then we, thanks to this, to these conversations, I learned from Joe about reaching out to our local historian, and one of our first units at the beginning of the year was just getting a sense of our town and the history of our town. And once you're out in the community, you start to see, kids often sort of walk around their town without really sort of taking in where they're from, and what are the stories that are there. And so Wendy's really been focusing on stories and place. And while I've been doing more of this like food thing, but there are folks that really want students involved locally in the community. And a lot of it's just stumbling upon, hey, do you have a minute? Can I talk to you about food is an easy one because kids love thinking about food. They're always hungry. We always have topics and issues around food in our in our snack bowls and whatever. So I think it's taking some time to reach out to local partners is important. The town clerk's office, the town planner, that helps us. We had a meeting last year with someone, and they were wanting the kids to design a skate ramp because the kids were just looking for something to do. And so it wasn't the whole team, but it was a group of kids that were really psyched about that. And then we also, I also think generating these ideas with kids, they have to like see that what the potential could be. Sometimes they might be the laggers or the stragglers, like, I don't know, but there's enough momentum of some others that they can like pull the group along. And Don, I don't want to take your thunder, but what I learned from you at the workshop at the MGI conversations in January, or the MGI follow-up session in January, was this idea of like, and I'm going to get it wrong, so please correct me, but it was like learn, act, convey, communicate, or there was something in there. And that helped me to frame what we were doing. Like, let's give them the background. Let's give them the basic information that they need. And then what's the action that can come from this? And then how are we going to communicate this impact, what we're trying to do? So will you correct that for me, Don, so I don't get it wrong? But
as a matter of fact, Meg, you did steal my thunder, but that's okay. Yes. So thanks, Meg. So we have the framework that I'm working with is actually Kevin helped me do this when we were talking about personalized learning. And the framework was educate, act, connect, and communicate. And the idea is that you learn about an issue, you take action on that issue, and then you connect with a local organization to enhance what you're doing, and then you communicate that in some way. And it's amazing when you write about something theoretically and you're like, oh yeah, this is a great theory, but I've been using it in the class. And so it's actually structuring my curriculum. So when we talked about food insecurity and I riffed on some of that, we're actually bringing that to the kids in sort of short, intense, like a class will read the impact statement of Just Basics, and we'll look at food insecurity. We'll look at locally in Vermont. And according to UVM right now, it's 2 out of 5 families have experienced food insecurity. I'd have to verify that number, but it has risen significantly. And then we also look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which several of you have mentioned. And so that's the educate part. And then we try and figure out how are we going to act on that. And for us, it's that connection. The action and the connection have now become almost one, because we go over to Just Basics. And one example is that they were lots of donations come in, big, huge bags of pasta, big, huge bags of onions. But the people who are going to Just Basics, they might not even have access to a kitchen. They might need microwavable meals. And so we actually connect with them. They say, hey, can you take these onions? Can you take this tomato sauce? Can you take this bulk pasta and do something with it? And our kids will turn it into single serving meals. And then we take it back and we put that on the shelves and we donate it and we keep that data. And then we communicate that out. And we do that using social media. And also we have a quarterly newsletter that the kids are writing. And I am very interested in the resource that Devin mentioned, the National Geographic, about journalism, because a lot of what we're doing is sort of journalism, which is kind of near and dear to my heart. And the other thing that's happening is that I connected with the Vermont Folk Life Center. Don't ask me how, but I connected with them, and they are helping me do a small pilot project, which I think we're going to focus on sugaring. And the project is going to be about, well, there's some lessons, and one of the lessons is how do you think about something when you hear it as opposed to when you read it. So Joe Rivers, who also is working on that project, has his kids interviewed a maple sugarer, and I have the transcript of that, and I might have the kids read it, and then I might have the kids listen to the transcript and ask, what's the difference in your perception of what's happening? And that could go down a road into how we judge people by how they speak. It could go into bias. It could go into sort of all these different elements of how what we hear can be very different when we read it. And then the other piece of that, obviously, is the practice of interviewing. So we might try and get kids to interview local sugarers, and ultimately the goal would be to ask them how the sugaring is changing due to climate impacts and how that might impact Vermont's culture. And at the same time, our kids are going out and collecting sap, they're boiling, they're bottling, and they're actually engaged in the process themselves. So that idea of this educate, act, connect, and communicate is one that I'm now using to build my units of study and to think about. And it's been pretty helpful, I think. Joe?
Well, some organization. Well, first, the book that Devin mentioned is a great book. I would say again what Devin said. One of the things about place-based education is it's been around a while, and there hadn't really been anything published in a long time that was like the next step. And the book that Devin referred to is the next step. Things were written in the 80s and the 90s, a long time ago. And this is like the updated version. So it's a great text for this century. The Vermont Folk Life Center, Don's talked about. Flow of History is another really good organization that has a strong website and lots of resources if you're looking to do place-based, community-based learning. And the Vermont Historical Society website, they've really done a lot recently to update and to make accessible, again, place-based, community-based stories that allow you to connect something in your community from the past to what's going on today. And that's really a focus of both of those organizations. And I think they're making some real positive strides, and would recommend them both. Things we're doing, we're connected with things you could do is you could reach out to the local newspaper if you still have such a thing. Newspapers are looking for content, and they're looking for free content, and they're looking to make connections at a local level. And so we have a weekly weekend article that we put out that's a collaboration between the Historical Society and the middle school. And we also have a podcast that goes out weekly, and we have a radio show. So the local radio, we have 2 local radio stations left, and we've been on both of them. And so over time, again, they're another organization that's looking for content and looking to make connections to a population that is drifting away. And so there are media outlets that have shown to be interested if you can provide content with them, and you can have students work on that content. So when Don's talking about journalism, that's the thing, you know, that's real. That's they can see it in the paper on the weekend. They can listen to it on the podcast. They can see it, you know, on the SoundCloud channel. So I think those are ways to try to make what you're doing in the community and with your projects things that students will work towards because they see that they're end products that are embraced by things outside of the walls of the school.
All right, thank you, Joe. I'm getting all these ideas here from folks. Maybe start them next year. But we have time for one more question, I think. And again, I appreciate everybody committing to show up in these discussions. We've talked a lot about how these discussions really are thoughtful, and they certainly help my practice. The last question that I have is just what have been some of the unexpected outcomes of this type of education curriculum or programming? Like, what are some things that you've seen that maybe you didn't expect and that have been real positives? And then the other part of that is, why now? Why does this seem to be a good response to what happened in the pandemic? And I know I've had some experiences, and that have been surprising to me in a really good way. And I just want to hear if anybody else has had those same experiences. Christy?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about just the joy that I've seen from students when they're presenting, and the pride that they have about the work that they've done in these particular kinds of projects, like the CPS projects. Yeah, I think there's a lot of pride that comes from doing something that is very tangible and helpful for a community, for their own community. And I'm thinking that question of why now is so interesting because, and we've spoken of this before in these conversations, but just how the pandemic just laid bare so many truths about the system of school, and how a lot of it is just done because we've just always done it. And I think kids can see through that, and they're saying, like, why do I have to, when we were during the pandemic, we shifted things this way or we did it that way. Like, why are we now going back to what was going on before, which didn't seem to work for a lot of students? And so I think anything you can do to bring real life and real connections and community building in is going to be helpful, particularly now as we're just confronting all of the truths that the pandemic has laid bare. So, yeah.
I guess for us, it's not so much unexpected anymore, but I still just love to see it happen. And I guess I am a little surprised or like, why didn't we think about this earlier? But I think benefit for being on a 4-year team is, just being able to foster those 4-year relationships between the students. Like we have, 10-year-olds and 13-year-olds who are mixing and becoming very close. It's like, that's simulating real life experience. Typically, you're not just hanging out with people who are your own age all the time. So, we do so much with team building activities and whatnot to like build those relationships between the grades. So it's not like, oh, I'm a 5th grader, I'm over here, I'm a 7th grader, I'm over here, but like the true 5-8 team. And when we do like our sustainability committee groups, it's just so great to see like these 5-8 groupings come together, and like the 5th graders talking with the 8th graders and like going to meetings together and interacting in such a positive way, and just like linking up and building different friendships and relationships through some of this great work with through the community. And it's I'm just like, yeah, why don't we do more of this? Because it really does foster those great, just multi-age connections. And I think any teams or programs are looking for that, like look no farther than doing some of this community-based programming, because it's there. And it's just simulating what hopefully we're doing in our real lives after school. So that's one thing, again, not as unexpected now, but just like every time it happens, I'm like, oh yeah, like this is great. This is just another reason why we want to sink our teeth into this and put the time and effort and energy into this type of work.
Yes, I agree with you. I love that multi-age groupings. I used to multi-age 6th, 7th, and 8th for integrated studies, and it was really magical seeing the 8th and the 6th collaborate. I think for unexpected outcomes or positives, I think one that I can think of most recently is that doing projects during the pandemic was an increase in confidence. So I think students were shut down in ways that we never anticipated, and then had to kind of come out into this kind of really super weird environment. And by doing projects where they were social and working together and exploring new concepts, new ideas. I know that there were many students who just felt like they kind of could come out of their shell and be themselves and discover things about themselves that they didn't realize. I know I can specifically think of a student who all of a sudden realized that she loves science so much she wants to be a scientist because of the work we were doing with the stream table projects in our classroom. I think in terms of why now, I think, Christy, you kind of alluded to this and mentioned this too, but I think it's so important to build those social skills and collaborative skills. I think that is a huge area of challenge and disconnect that happened because of the pandemic. And I think it's really doing project-based learning is such a great way to foster those collaboration skills in a really authentic, meaningful way. I think doing these projects and hearing these service-based projects, I mean, it's so authentic and real world, and that's going to be so engaging and exciting for students. And we're definitely in a time where we have to figure out what is engaging and what does school look like for students, and getting innovative and perhaps going back to some of those old school things, like Joe said, place-based education is not new, but what can it look like these days? What's important to the community? And I think at the end of the day, I think one of the most important pieces of why now is because it really fosters civic engagement and responsibility and those strong connections and ties to the community that you live in. And I think if we almost do nothing else for our students, just having them feel pride and compassion towards those around them, for the land, the people, I think they're walking out of school pretty strong in my mind.
I think the thing that I think, and I echo what Kev said, and first of all, I miss 6th, 7th, and 8th grade multi-age so much. I love the 2 years, but having those additional years just, I think goes such a long way. But one thing I love about doing some of this work is the hidden talents that we don't always get to see from kids, that when this invitation is broad and they get to express themselves in a variety of mediums, we just see these talents that they have, that, or these interests or these passions that, especially for some of our more quiet kids, when the behaviors that we see right now are some of the, the pretty challenging, very loud, boisterous, sort of dominant personalities that can sort of overshadow a room. And when you get that opportunity to kind of see everyone's interest and talents, that's always, it's not really a surprise, but it's just a real joy to have that opportunity. And, I think about the 7th graders right now. So they were in 4th grade when we were in the pandemic, and that is a critical year, right? 4th grade is a really critical year for them to work in small groups and to learn some autonomy and some independence. And so we're just trying to help them connect, not I've really gotten rid of Chromebooks for a lot of my work in my classroom, obviously, except for when I need it, but just trying to establish more and more opportunities for kids to engage in conversation, to lean into uncomfortable conversations, to call in and call out, to not feel like they have to that they can't speak their mind, that they're finding ways to speak their mind without necessarily feeling like they can express themselves completely. And so I just think the challenges are real, and we have to build in those student skills, those communication skills, those executive functioning skills, and that appreciation, right? Appreciation for our democracy and appreciation for our, our roles and responsibilities in our communities. It's really critical.
Excuse me, Meg, I just want to tag on to that idea of the communications, because I think that's one of sort of the outcomes that I've seen. One of the things that we've done is I teach 5, 6, 7, and 8 classes, but I have a separate class that's a multi-age 7 and 8, and there are MSMS Sustained Leadership Group. And that group was formed with the help of Up for Learning. And we meet every day and across the entire year. And those kids are really helping to build and support the program. But their willingness to go out and to speak, they went out and presented to every TA in the school. And when we presented it, I was like, do you guys really want to do this? And they're like, yeah, sign us up. And they planned the whole thing. They did the presentation and it was awesome. And to hear them go out and to have different experiences with presenting and then to reflect on what they were doing was sort of one of those things where I was like, holy smokes, we need to do this, as Kevin said, more often because they enjoy that challenge. And some of them were really good at it. And we paired them up, an 8th grader with a 7th grader. And by pairing them consciously so that, you pair up kids who have different strengths, it was really great to see. And I think that leads into this idea of leadership, which is something that's been really important to us, is what makes a good leader and how do you build leadership? And as Meg was talking about, like organizational skills, that's all part of leadership, planning and organization. And we're at a point in the year now where I can turn to some kids and say, can you plan this out? And those kids they know how to do it. They have experience doing it and they can show other kids what that looks like. And I think that's been a really unexpected outcome that I want to take and build into the program, because I think those leadership skills can push out into all elements of a kid's lives. And I think it's really important. And then another unexpected outcome is that we've moved away from technology quite a bit, both in that leadership class and in our classrooms. I'm only using technology for like the end product, for a final draft or for a podcast, but everything leading up to that, I'm trying to have kids do by hand, whether that's writing out drafts or taking notes or, baking bread or going sugaring or talking collaboratively with each other. I feel like the pandemic made us rely on technology, way too much. I think that it's really impacted kids' ability to communicate effectively, focus, and as Joe was saying, to have sort of that ability to stay with something for a long time. And so I think one of the things about project-based learning is that you can get kids working with their hands. And, I'm not saying technology is critical, but I also think we need to be very thoughtful about how we're sort of employing that. And then the final sort of outcome that I see in the project-based learning that's a little unexpected is just how willing kids are to collaborate with each other if they're engaged. If you have a project where kids are engaged, it seems that they're much more willing to work with each other and to compromise and to recognize, and this is important, to recognize what's going well. Oh, we all split up the work. And that's actually, organization. And so you can weave in these transferable skills that make sense and that occur naturally. And then if you can help kids name them, I think they understand how to transfer those skills to other activities and other areas. So those are some of the unexpected outcomes that I've seen. And I've been pleasantly surprised with somebody mentioned, you don't expect some kids to be willing to do these things. And you put the challenge out there, and it's just great to see all the different kids willing to step up and take those chances. And that's one of my favorite things to do is support those kids. And they become leaders after doing that. Joe?
I think I'll focus on the place-based, community-based part of things and how that is playing out post-COVID or really just in the last 5 or 8 years. There's been a real push towards diversity equity work. And what we're unintended consequence is that when we go after local stories and we start researching our history here in our place, what we find is that the stories are very white Protestant stories. And so what we're doing is we're actually broadening the story. We're broadening the palette of what was in the past and how that has a connection to what's today. And so I think it's inclusive to go to place-based learning and to chase those stories. and to find out what happened and then make connections from what happened to what's happening today. And there's a lot today. I'm not going to do it, but we just found out that there's two chairs over there in our classroom that were built in the 1980s, right here in this town, when industrial production was part of the Vermont landscape and how that has changed over time. And so there's so many ways that you could connect what's going on now with what happened in the past, especially if you have a broader range of stories that include everyone as you're doing that research. And a great place to do the research is through the Secretary of State's office. They make the digital newspapers across the state available for free to any person who has a residence in Vermont, including our students. And so all that sort of research can happen and you can find those stories out. So diversity, equity work through the lens of place-based learning is an unintended way, a path forward.
I think that's a fantastic way to bring our conversation to a close. I want to thank everybody for your contributions. I appreciate you all so much. Devin, I want to thank you for bringing your contributions to the group. I really appreciate it. It was great to hear from you. Please come again. To all of you, I hope things continue to go well. I feel like, I hate to say it, but I feel like we're starting to get into that part of the year when things are coming together, I hope. And we're kind of working towards our end purposes as teams and communities. And I hope things continue to go well. Our next conversation will be April 20th at 3:15. And again, thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic evening. And thanks for all the work you do for our community, students, and families. Take care, and we'll see you next month.